on his shoulder. Oh, how it feels there to hit him with his knees.
It's time for disorganized play. It's time for some Dungeons and Dragons today. It's time for us to get together and be human or demi-human or even gnomes. Disorganized play, disorganized play. It's what we're going to talk about today. Disorganized play, disorganized play. It's a new wave fascination. That was very...
That was good, Tom.
It's hard without like the guitars and the synthesizers behind it.
That's what they said at the very beginning of the new wave.
We should invent guitars and synthesizers.
If only we had guitars and synthesizers.
Only. Most people don't know that the first new wave was actually in 650 million BC when the first creatures grew legs and crawled out of the ocean. That was the first new wave. Before that, all the old waves were just like slursh, slursh, slursh. Are you just a primordial bacterial soup? Boring.
True.
Let's get some predator-prey kind of like hierarchy going here. Hi everyone, I'm Tom Lemmel. I'm your dungeon master and co-host of this very show. I'm not known for my songistic. I just said
Well, you almost said songistic.
I wanted to say linguistic and then I wanted to say musical, and so I decided to combine them together into a thing I call a songistic. Hey, every Tuesday we get together, we talk about the adventure that we'll be playing every Wednesday right here on this channel at 8 o'clock, and every Thursday we get back together and go, well, I don't know, that was interesting. We have a little recap show. So, welcome to it. I'm your host and Dungeon Master, Tom Lemmel. This is my co-host and our illustrious leader and producer, Dom Zook.
Hello.
Hi everyone, thanks for putting up with us, and thanks for joining us. Tell your friends, spread the word. We're just getting into the meat of Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. We've had one session where they were inside the ship. That was last week. So we're beginning our true foray into this D&D classic, and welcome along for the ride. We're going to be making some, what I like to call a remix, or it's not really is it a reboot? I hate the idea that it's a reboot.
Yeah.
I guess it could be considered a reboot, but I really like to think that it's a remix. It's there's some other term that I want to use for it, but it's escaping me at the moment. Anyway, relaunch. I think it's a revision or update. You know, like it's updating an old classic for a modern style of play, rather than like a reboot. Kind of is like, well, let's tell the same story, but kind of scrub all the serial numbers off. And I don't think this is going to be the same exact story for sure. So we have a few topics on the docket today. Flowchart pros, flowchart cons. We will be pinging Plot Radar, which is another DM tool and technique that I use to help organize my my thoughts going into like what's our priority here. And then finally, we're going to talk about some art references, or a treasure trove of art that I found, which I want to share with you all, which I think is very appropriate for the game. So that's our agenda for today. Of course, if you have questions about what's going on or whatever, feel free to chip in. If they're not particularly germane to what we're talking about, we may kick the can down the road to either the end of today's chat here on Twitch, or possibly to Thursday. Right? Can't get too derailed from our agenda. Otherwise Dom gets cranky because his blood sugar like spikes and then crashes, and then
it's true.
Yeah. If one thing you need to know about Dom Zook, he's deep down an angry man.
100%.
100%.
You've seen my emote. You know.
All right. So, what's this flowchart pros and cons? We talked about this. Was it a week ago, 2 weeks ago? I cracked out the book and like talked about how instead of organizing the adventure according to the map, we organized the adventure into kind of like choices or whatever.
It was a week ago, I believe.
It was a week ago. Well, guess what, everyone? Today, I sat down. Do we have the overhead cam?
We do. Yeah, I can cut over to that.
Sure. Let's make it happen.
I can do that. There you go.
It's not going to be great. Here's the thing. If you're a Patreon backer, at the $5 level and up, you can get a far better image of this in your in the Iron Keep Dropbox folder, just for Patreons. So again, along with all the other materials that I've provided there, you may want to join the Patreon. Yes, yes. All right, so what did we do here?
Just Lord help the first person to spill something.
Yeah, whoever spills something on the table. It was a joke when I said Dom Zook is an angry, angry man. You will see that transformation happen when somebody spills something on this table. It's going to happen.
It's been so close, like every time.
What was it? Like after the game last week, Gaurav was like, "We should get Luigi up here on the table," and I could see Dom like visibly flinch.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about what's going on here. So spoiler alert for those of you who are familiar with the adventure. It's not a spoiler alert, but for everyone else, hey, guess what? Welcome to it. This is our map for level 1 for the main deck, right? And just to refresh everyone, what's going on is this is what's been traditionally presented in an adventure, right? It doesn't. It's one way of gaining insight into what's happening in our module, right? Now, I'm going to philosophize just a little bit here, but here's the main issue that I have with most adventures, right? Is that they are a series of locations that are often, but not usually, very casually or tenuously attached to discoveries and events and turns of the plot, right? The truth of modern role-playing is that modern role-playing is a dramatic act where characters interact with NPCs and villains in the environment and are changed by those events and or cause change in those events and undergo a dramatic turn, right? They discover things, suspense builds to a climax, then there's denouement. It's classic storytelling 101. That was not the original intent of D&D designers. It was, or at least they didn't either design that way or it didn't occur to them to design with a storytelling focus, right? So instead what they did was they gave us maps and they put things on the maps and they talked about people who were, these are high challenge creatures and these are low challenge creatures and this is a really cool cache of treasure that you can discover if you do X, Y, and Z with the secret door, right? All of that stuff. But it doesn't lead you to understand, like to a better understanding of the events or the occurrences of how your play session is going to build to that resounding climax, whether it's over the course of one session or over the course of multiple, right? It just doesn't give you any insight into how do I make a game that's engaging and grabs the player's attention and gets them involved and get them into the stakes, right? And that's fine. Like that's the origins of the hobby. That's the way it was. That was state of the art circa 1974, 1980, whatever year you want to pick. Pluck that particular gem out of the basket. No problem with that. But we don't have to stick with 1980, right? Just like you don't have to drive a car that only gets 13 miles to the gallon. You could get a car that gets 36 or 40 miles to the gallon. We can take advantage of new technology, right? So anyway, this is very overwhelming to me. I looked at this and I'm like, I don't really understand what's going on. I don't know how to structure my sessions and help lead people to discoveries and and it makes a certain amount of sense if you're actually playing on the grid and you're having them map it out, but you very quickly get lost in the minutia of giving descriptions of like, okay, now we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so it's 80 feet up to that T intersection. The T intersection is 20 feet wide north to south and 10 feet wide east to west, and then it goes off in 1, 2, 3, who cares, right? Like it's a particular style of play that I personally think is tedious when it's indulged in too much. There's certainly a time and place for it, but that's not my style. So last week I decided to take the adventure off the grid and do theater of the mind and describe all of this stuff, right? So we described how they went through the airlock and they encountered this first like sunken area and they got attacked by the trapper in the bottom, and then they had this encounter with the Vegapygmies, and literally like the Vegapygmies just led them off into the darkness. Like that's as much as it was described. I didn't say, okay, you go 60 feet this way and then you go 50 feet north and you go 60 feet east, and you're not even sure which way east is anyhow, but let's just say for random arbitrary sake of argument, blah, blah, blah. I did dispensed with all of that, right? I just said they lead you through all of these corridors until eventually you arrive at it. So one of the things that I suggested, rather than sticking so close to the grid, is to do it as kind of like a set of flowchart style choices, right? And it's not going to be super terrific legible here today, which that's fine, because I'm not going to talk about this in a lot of detail, right? But we have our start here at the airlock, and then I know, kind of based on the geography, I know, okay, well, if we go east, there's the lurker thing is attached here. I can go to the Vegapygmies. There's this game room. Like, so I've got things. This is really actually more of an abstract, rather than a flowchart. It's an abstract map of the complex, which is fine. Like, obviously, I think one of the goals is like to get to this end of the map. It seems salient to me, right? Or that seems fairly obvious. Like the captain's quarters has a lot of great stuff in it. The security chief's quarters has a lot of great stuff in it. You'll probably, anyway. The point being is I've created the areas in the ship in these blue ovals, and then I've created specific encounters of things along the way in these red little boxes, little trapezoids here, right? So that I can just look at this thing and get my head around the idea of, okay, what's our flow around the ship? How do we go back to, how do we get to, right? This is a very just abstract look at what the layout of this particular deck is like. So, the pros here are, first and foremost, I don't have to put up with all of this crap, right? I don't know how well you can see this on the camera, but like these rooms are like 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12A, 12B, 12C, 12D, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, it's like, that's worthless to me. They also have a huge mix of door coding, numbered encounters, and then labeled encounters, right? So this is a meeting room, and you get into it by going through these double doors, and adjacent to it are a bunch of chambers that have J's, which means they're coded to jet black cards. And in the meantime, before you get there, you have to go through encounter number 4, and you're literally looking on 3 different pages to figure out, maybe even more, to figure out how all this stuff relates together, right? With this particular layout, this flowchart or skeleton kind of map, I guess there's another name for it too, but I don't remember. It was like a string map or something like that. Anyway, with this skeleton layout, right? I can just abstract all this stuff. These are quarters. I know that they all have jet black cards attached to them. Fine. This is the medical area. Great. I look up medical. That's orange or whatever it is. Yellow. Medical is yellow. Orange is security. I can either note some of that on here or color code it if I want to with a highlighter. But I can condense that information to something that's much more immediately digestible and approachable than trying to deal with this nightmare of graphic layout and design, where you can't even tell, like, because they're trying to include the illumination and things like that, it's like, it hurts me to look at this thing. I love it in terms of like how dense and literally impenetrable it is to human comprehension, because it's like classic dungeon. There's so much information coming at you at one time, and it's not well presented, and it makes it feel like a dungeon. But that's just nostalgia talking. In terms of usability as a DM, just like, ugh, throw it out, right? But what this gives me is it gives me opportunities to also edit, right? So there were quarters around the Vegapygmies here that I didn't even really describe. But as like FD Every points out, like I have a random atmosphere generator that I can use to kind of like make each of these areas unique, right? And rather than mucking with my map and trying to figure out what those things are, I can start slicing this into discrete parts, right? I've got a lot of quarters on this map. There's a lot of room for crewmen. Okay, I can either start differentiating, okay, well, these are all gonna be like this, and this is gonna be different, and this is gonna be one type of area. And so now I can group this stuff. Or I can just kind of like hand wave like, okay, and then you go from the turbo lift to the workshop or whatever. It also gives me insight into, okay, we start here, we leave from the Vegapygmies. If they're being sent on a quest or they are following a quest line that says they want to go and meet with the other Vegapygmies, what types of encounters are they likely to have along the way? So I follow this along, we might end up in the core, we could go through these weird quarters or this dining room, we could have this encounter at the turbo lift, we might end up in the art workshop, but somewhere along the line, we will most likely end up with the Shriekers and the Vegapygmies, right? And what that tells me is now I don't have to worry about what's going on over here on this turbo lift. I don't have to worry about prepping the security chief's quarters, any of that. Like, it gives me an idea of like, what's my most likely path through here? So that's the advantage to abstracting it this way, is you just edit out all of the crap that's confusing. Honestly, like literally confusing, especially the levels of illumination going on in the nobody, like it does not matter for the purposes of our particular story whether the room is lit or not. Like that matters to two people, and that's just something that I can decide either on the fly or like ahead of time, but it's not such a key, crucial plot point that I need to muddy up my map with that, right? So those are the advantages. It allows me to see in much more clarity and detail where my encounters are, my big discoverable things. I didn't label all of the ones that are in, like the medical lab and the police HQ and stuff like that. Obviously, I know that there's going to be a lot more going on here, right? But what it does do is it filters out the noise of quarters, dining room, kitchen, like this stuff that is obviously just fill that they had to put on the map to make the map feel big, feel like it was a really well-staffed starship. And I can kind of just push all of that aside and go, yeah, I know that, but I don't want to have to deal with the noise of it. So again, this is available if you're Patreon backer at $5 and up. It's available in the Dropbox folder. You can take a look at. I took a picture with my phone, so it's decent quality. It's better than probably what you're going to get on the camera here, but I did it so I could get my mind around this level and start planning. Okay, well, where do we end up in the next 2 or 3 sessions? Mm-hmm. What are they going to end up encountering? And I suspect, now that we've kind of gone this way and we're headed this way, we may never like come back to these parts of the adventure. I don't know. We'll see. But it gives me a flow through this thing, right? Now, what are the cons of this? The big con to this, if you watched last week, you sort of saw this, is that the players don't necessarily feel like they have a ton of choice in terms of exploring the ship, because you describe it in such abstract and kind of like hand-waving terms of you follow this main corridor has several branches off to it, and you see a bunch of abandoned doorways with chambers that are overgrown with vines and heaped with refuse, and then you move along following the Vegapygmy down into X number of descripted whatever that area is, right, to the big mud bath area, whatever. And the advantage there was we didn't have to like ants march our way down to every single let's explore every single corridor and passageway and make sure we're not sifting through, let's sift through all the trash and make sure we're not leaving anything behind, right? We got very quickly, in terms of the story and the presentation, from you've encountered a Vegapygmy to meeting with the chief. Do you want to join the mind meld? I have information, I can explain the history of what's happening here. I can relate to you. You can query me, etc. Right? Which is where the meat of our interaction is, right? Like, I've said this before, but I'm going to repeat it. Your job as the DM is to reveal information, right? Now, we could have tried to reveal some information through them doing a bunch of finicky kind of like, well, I searched this room, what do I find? Oh, you find this piece of, blue flattened piece of horn or blue ivory that has a little strange jewel embedded in it. Oh, okay, well, that's a long process to drop hints through inanimate objects, unless you drop like a hologram thing pops up and you see, someone giving some sort of speech or whatever, right? All that kind of stuff. There are ways to do it, but the most direct and immediate way to convey information to your players, other than just flat out telling them the stuff, is to have them interact with an NPC, right? It's also far more engaging for everyone at home to watch, is for them to, I hope it's more engaging. It's all story style. My nose is itchy today. But that's why I chose to do that. Now, the flip side of it is now the players kind of feel like they're lost in the ship, which I think is okay. Like, that's kind of like one of the goals here, right? Is to convey how big this thing is and make them feel kind of lost. But they're going to say like, oh, well, he pointed that direction. we're just going to keep going that way. That's probably the next thing that's going to happen. Now that feels like a failure of interaction or a failure of opportunity there, right? In terms of now the players just sort of, they feel like they don't have a choice and they don't have the tools or information to help them make a choice. So now they are relying on you as the DM to not screw them over by going, we're going to go the way that you told us to go. But it doesn't feel very like fun and engaging. It doesn't feel like they've made a decision, right? So that's why I think we're going to take this and probably in this next session flip it over and actually go back on the grid, right? So once I say, okay, well, you go down the corridor, 200, 300 feet or whatever it is, and you probably describe a whole new area for them or a whole new atmosphere, and then say, okay, here's what it looks like. Put it on the grid, draw some hallways and corridors and things like that, and then give them some clues that help them decide how they want to approach this thing. And that way, if there is, like, say, an ambush or whatever it is, they feel like they haven't just been led to an ambush, encounter starts, roll for initiative, there's nothing we could have done about it, right? Because you put them back on the grid and they feel like, oh, okay, you give them some signs of, oh, okay, you see something, you see a piece of trash that's been abandoned here. It looks like maybe somebody has stood watch or something. Oh, well, let's go around that. Okay, well, then you go around that. So that way they feel like, well, not just necessarily feel like, but they then have some control over, here's how we want to explore and approach this new area. Yeah. As opposed to, we're going to follow the one plot hook that we have so that we can keep playing the story and hopefully something interesting is going to happen. But that interesting thing is probably you just sending a fight after us and we don't have any way to avoid it or any way to mitigate it. So, well, I guess why don't we just roll for initiative now and you can skip all the description crap that you were planning to do, right? So that's something to consider, right? Is that you use the grid strategically when it's important and interesting, and you ignore the grid when you want to get to either different goals or you want to paint a different atmosphere or whatever. Mr. Brian Patterson, D20 Monkey, says, my approach was to basically edit and simplify the entire ship map. This is more elegant and less labor intensive. You know, I have a friend here in LA who's a great DM, and he shared some of his notes on this particular adventure because he was doing a 5e conversion of it himself. And like his approach was cut out all of the quarters to basically do what Brian did, which was just draw kind of one big loop that had a bunch of different encounter areas around that loop.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the simplicity of that. It really makes it easy for the DM to like see what's going on. But I feel like what gets lost in that process is the scope, you know, the sheer scale of the ship, right? And it really needs to be huge. Are you gonna lay down? Hey. You can do it.
Well, I was thinking someone might. You know.
I was thinking I'd like a tater. Oh, you got one. You did it. You got one. Yes. Eat it directly over my bag. That's
Poor
perfect.
Harold. He sees this. He sees everything. It's like I'm just gonna.
He's like, I'm just gonna snore. Yeah, that's right, Chat. Chat, do you want a tater?
Tato.
And I think it's really important to get an idea of the scale of the map. Now, if you have the time or opportunity, do you want to pop the link to that DM's Guild thing?
Sure.
There's a really fantastic set of maps that are on DM's Guild, and this uses our affiliate ID, so we get a little something, something. But if you go in and look at that, they're enormous JPEG files that you could literally use on your tabletop. Everything is drawn in. It has details in every single room. It's very overwhelming. You know, the guy did a fantastic job, right? But it's very overwhelming in terms of you look at it, and I would only want to use it in specific cases, right? I'd want to print off like, okay, you're going to fight in this corridor. I'm going to print off these 9 sheets of paper or whatever,
Right.
and lay that down and go to, you know, let's do some work with it, right? So I love the work that guy did, and he did a tremendous job. And as far as I can tell, it's fairly accurate. So that's a little resource for everyone. I purchased it. I like it. I'm not sure when or how I'm going to deploy it, right? Especially because if I print it off, I don't know how to do Fog of War like live in person, right? I suppose I could take pieces of paper, like cardboard or whatever, and cover it up and say, you're here and this is what you can see. That always gets just kind of messy, and especially people got their dice on the table and all that kind of garbage.
I have a fog machine.
Okay, I have a great idea. Why don't we get one of those little air canisters, and I'll just continuously spray it right into in people's eyes when they're not supposed to be looking. Are you looking? Yeah. So, oh yeah, that was tremendous. I suppose I could do that too, right? So what BSB Care is referring to is during Monday Night Dungeon Fight, I mounted the map on a piece of not cardboard, but on foam core, and then I took literally a $1 plastic tablecloth that I got at the dollar store, and I taped it over the top of it. And as they explored, I would cut away the pieces that they could see, and reveal portions of the map.
Yeah.
It was a fun technique, but it kind of relies on you a little bit, like knowing what's underneath there.
Devry says use dry ice with barriers. To put little Dwarven Forge like barriers up. Just fill it in.
You know, if I had a set of sci-fi Dwarven Forge pieces, I would consider building like corridors and hallways for them to explore, and then just kind of grabbing pieces and setting them out and things like that, right? So, Wraith42 says, someone makes a Fog of War using dry erase, thick pen, and they place a clear plastic sheet over the map, and then they erase the dry erase as they come across it. It's interesting. It's an interesting technique. I'm not sure how I'll solve it, but that's the deal. So I think those are the pros and cons of something like this. I do think this was a useful exercise for me. It did take me, an hour and a half to do or whatever, but that map is so dense that I think it needed something like this. I think the other one other con here before we move on, or one other pro actually before we move on, is you can see the number of times that like dining room and kitchen come up. And you can start making decisions about how am I going to make these things different? Because there's one here, there's one here, there's one here, there's one here. You know, there's these 4 different dining and kitchen areas. How do I make them, each of them, interesting and unique? And sometimes the answer is you don't, and you just cut them or they're abandoned or whatever. But you can start to see where stuff repeats. All right. Now that everybody's had a chance to take a crappy screenshot and is set to make their own copy, good for you. Let's go back and revisit Plot Radar. So these are the various elements that we decided last week are in play. Now, just going to kind of set the table here a little bit for those of you who are new. Both the flowchart that we did and the geographical map still just give you geographical insight into how the adventure is structured, right? It doesn't give you any kind of discovery or plot insight into what's actually happening in your game, right? Because the map of a location doesn't mean anything unless you know what your players know about what's on that map and what they're likely to encounter in the next session and the next couple of sessions down the road. What's his deal?
He's just standing over here.
Okay, Goober.
Yeah, all right.
So this plot radar is designed to give you that plot-related or discovery type of insight into what's going on in the game, right? So we know that last session they met the melding, what I call the melding Vegapygmies. That's better. They dealt with those guys. They also dealt with the puzzle or the obstacle of the cave of the iron worm. Those things, those elements are essentially closed or retired, right? I'm not expecting them to encounter either of those things again. It's possible, but it's unlikely that they're going to come back. But as a result of the melding Vegapygmies, they have been given directions, or at least a direction to follow, to encounter the technological Vegapygmies, or the Techapygmies, as I like to call them, who are tied to Avril's parents, right? Also, they've taken their first step in the key quest, and they've got a key. They don't know what it does or what it's for, but they're probably going to figure that out pretty soon. Some other things that are kind of coming down the pipe are, I've discussed extensively the idea that there's actually artificial intelligence or multiple artificial intelligences on board the ship who are responsible for keeping the ship running. We know that there are robots that are loose in the complex. What do they do? When do they encounter those? We know that there's a library that is going to help shed some light on the fact that they're on a ship and what type of ship it is, etc. And when we talk about those maps, in the adventure, it describes how they basically pull up a view screen in the library, and it just starts flashing like random maps and images, and here's a deck plan, right? Well, we're going to need to be prepared for super handout moment when that comes along. Also approaching is like knowledge of the God's fire. What is it? How does it work? How do they relate to it, etc. And we've got a bunch of things that are kind of off on the horizon. Some things that I call dangling, which means they have high player awareness, but I as the DM, I don't have a lot of priority to them. What the Cataclysm event is, kind of the doppelgangers appearing, I don't think that's going to happen soon. Even though, if we go back and look on our map, this is getting a little... If they go to the Vegapygmies, they could end up at the turbo lift where the doppelgangers are supposedly hanging out. I think that doppelganger encounter is boring. It's just a combat encounter, and it could use a lot more juice, especially given the fact that one of the PCs is a doppelganger, right? So in my game, it has a lot more story weight than somebody goes down the turbo shaft and the doppelgangers jump out and start attacking, right? So I want to make sure that that moment has its moment rather than them just kind of inadvertently stumbling into it. Do you guys, you want a French fry?
Sit down on your mat.
Sit down on your, lay down on your towel. So the most important thing here is that plot radar gives me an idea of what I have set up for them to discover, what they're anticipating to discover, and how close they are to actually like interacting with those elements, right? So that's how this is useful. Now, some things that are dormant or kind of just hanging out there is we've introduced an atmosphere issue. Like I said, when they got inside the ship, the breathing was funny. And they found this owl thing, and that's kind of hanging out there. Like Avril just put it in her backpack. FD Every says, can doppelgangers recognize other doppelgangers like the giant gnomes can sniff them out? So I think, well, okay, so there's two things I want to address there. First of all, I think that it's becoming a little too convenient that every single important person that they encounter, or even like some arbitrary people that they encounter, apparently can sniff out doppelgangers, right? The gnomes did it, Xanathar does it, like there's a bunch of people who, it's becoming a little bit tread worn and tiresome that every time the party meets somebody who seems to have more than like a 10 intelligence goes, oh, you're a doppelganger.
Yeah.
It really takes away from some of like the specialness, right? It is a great way to like shine the spotlight on Grayson and make him feel uncomfortable and also just kind of like get that elephant, out of the room. But it's becoming it's straining credibility, it's becoming a little too convenient, and it's stealing one of his special abilities, is negating one of his special abilities. So I don't like to play that card a lot. However, if you go back to the Palace of Mirrors episode that closed out the season that ended in December, one of the visions and flashbacks or flash forwards that they had was the party kind of like getting beaten down by these guys in these strange spacesuits, and before everybody can get wiped out, the visor goes up and there's a doppelganger in there, and he goes, "Brother, you've returned to us." So the short answer is yes, the doppelgangers, it's been prophesized that the doppelgangers recognize Grayson. I feel really bad about having it come up so often, but in this case, it's been sort of like foreordained that they will be able to recognize him. It happened with the Veggie Pygmies too, where like he like touched his consciousness, and I do it in moments where it's very plausible that those people would know that, but I feel like there have been too many moments where it's plausible.
Yeah. Well, I think Chief Mudbutt, he, I mean, to me that was almost a DNA test, right? Because he like literally went into Grayson's skin.
Does he drop form when he goes into death saves? He hasn't been unconscious in a really long time.
Yeah.
like I think Grayson has only been knocked unconscious once.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe twice.
Yeah, we haven't really gone into that, I don't think.
No, I mean, he will be the first to tell you that. Like, I don't get knocked unconscious.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting character. There's room to explore there. Now, let's use Plot Radar to kind of look at where our session is going tomorrow night, right? That's the main purpose of this. So, the big caveat that we have to keep in mind is that this is unbeknownst to you guys, and just came up over the weekend, but Havana is going to be out this week. She's got something else going on, right? So that takes Avril's character off the table. Now, kind of creates some chaos here because our big immediate, like I thought where we were going to go next session was we're going to deal with the Tekapygmies and potentially either free or encounter or somehow learn more information about Avril's parents. Well, that is the plan. We could stick to that plan, but it seems pretty crappy to
Just drop her in the next week.
Yeah, drop her the next week,
everyone
and her parents are like, oh, Avril, where have you been?
We were just talking
Right.
about these other people.
So that throws a wrench in the works here. Now, that does give us the opportunity to promote this doppelganger theme. I don't know that I'm ready to do that. I think I don't have. I have some thoughts about what the doppelgangers are up to, but I don't have them like drawn in enough detail. Like I don't have enough specifics in my brain right now to go, oh yeah, this is how they're going to come in and this is what they're going to do, right? So there's that. We do have some things on deck here that could be promoted, right? Like for one thing, spam caller. No, thank you, spam caller. For one thing, they could still fight all the Tekapygmies, right? That's still an option.
I'd do it.
We could have a very tactical combat on the grid, them exploring, ambushing, probing, etc. Right? So that's what's going on here. I don't care about any of this stuff. So that could be, we could actually, it might make the combat even more difficult. Raise the challenge here a little bit, in that they're missing one party member. Like, it would be great if we had somebody who could hide and actually go around and like sneak attack these people on the flank, but Avril's not available. Yeah, so it's been suggested that maybe, Avril gets kidnapped by the ship or something like that, or seizes her mind. I'm really kind of struggling with where to go with this, because it's going to require some player buy-in to go, well, she's going to have to sit out for a session, but your PCs are going to have a plausible reason to believe that she's safe or not in harm's way.
Right.
I mean, I guess there could be a thing where she falls through some sort of like trapdoor, or gets grappled by something and sucked up into a vent and carried away, and then they go on a quest to like find her. But that feels like a diversion away from the plot elements that we're developing here.
Yeah, it's also, I tend to have problems with those things when players are missing, that they just get kidnapped or controlled or something like that, because it takes their agency away, and how that player might have handled that situation. Like if you're just basically saying, oh, I killed your character while you were gone, because you weren't there,
Right,
or whatever.
right.
It's like, wait, but I would have done stuff,
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're like, oh, well, she would have been kidnapped or something. It's like, okay, well.
It also invites just a lot of like armchair quarterbacking from the rest of the party of like, well, wait a minute, how do they even grapple her? She's got like a +12 in athletics or acrobatics or whatever, and da-da-da. Like, why couldn't she escape? And why didn't, if it was, like, say it was Thawne or Ava, like, why didn't she just Misty Step?
Right.
Out of the whole thing.
Right.
So it's a tricky thing to, it's tempting, but I don't want to diverge from, we've got enough plot elements out here that I don't want to diverge by creating this quest where Avril's lost and at the end of the session she's found or whatever.
I think what might be the best is putting her. She could stay with the Vegapygmies, who have somewhat shown that they're okay with the party. Havana has noted that she wants time to read that book,
Yeah.
And it might be that Avril is just like, okay, there's puzzles, there's things, there's all this stuff. I need to be smarter to handle this. Just give me a few, go out exploring, come back to me tomorrow, or whatever, and I'll be better equipped to handle all of this stuff. So that might make the most sense.
The tough part about that is, why would the party not go, why don't we just camp?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, in terms of good dungeoneering strategy, you have literally no reason to not. I mean, I suppose you could say, well, why don't you guys scout and we'll regroup here when I'm done digesting this book.
Maybe there's something that the Vegapygmies relay that gives them sort of a time crunch. Like, oh, we still have to do this, but I don't know.
Yeah. I think the other questions you have to ask yourself are, did Xanathar really give her a book that's a tome of intellect?
Yeah.
Like, what magical book did he give her?
Yeah.
Because he hinted that, like, maybe it's not what she thinks it is. And she was like, oh, well, I'll take it, and I'm not going to read it yet.
Right.
So, I don't know. There's opportunities there. I'm going to think about it, and we'll come up with something. But I think we have a couple different opportunities here that we could introduce. And the first and foremost being, like, potentially these robots, right? We could have robots roaming the ship. We can also, if we so choose, steal encounters from other areas of the ship. They don't know where they are. We can move these things around and have them encounter those. So, I don't know. I don't mind the idea of a scouting mission, like, kind of like bring around the closing segment of last session and have one of the blue-shouldered Vegapygmy kind of pull them aside and try to tell them, like, okay, this is a bad place you're going, and maybe like draw them a crude rudimentary map and put mark dangerous areas or whatever on there. Part of the issue there is the Vegapygmies don't really know. They can only communicate with. Right now, they can only really communicate with Grayson, right?
Right.
Like they can't really talk to these people. So, yeah. So, would I give her a cursed book? You damn right I would. There's a couple different options that we have there, I think. Yeah. All right. So I think probably, like, let's try to stick to the plan of, like, at least make a foray against the Tekka-Pygmies. The nice thing about this element is that it does kind of introduce, like, these Tekka-Pygmies are armed and equipped with technology, right? So they do have lasers and disruptors and blasters and powered armor or whatever it is. They do have technological items. So we have to make some decisions about that. And that also kind of brings around, like, well, we have to make some decisions about how they're going to discover the use, how to properly use these things, right? And I think that's a mini game in and of itself. There's a couple things that have also been hinted at in terms of this recurring cataclysm that happens on the ship, and more knowledge of the God's Fire and revealing what that is. I think something that's not on here that we might want to consider adding is that the Vegapygmies, the melding Vegapygmies, have described things in very cosmological or almost theological terms, right? So they're in heaven right now, and there are 3 different types of hell, and there's earth. And what does that mean? How can we drop things into the adventure tomorrow that will reflect, like, okay, well, this is a shaft that leads to hell, and you realize that it's like literally like a hole in the deck where, like, it's spewing, like, heat and radiation and nasty fumes and da-da-da. And you see little, like, demon-type creatures or whatever crawling up and down the thing, little imps, weird, misshapen creatures. Like, there's opportunities for that to come up as well. All right. So that's Plot Radar. I think it's a great tool. We didn't put a lot on it today, but what it does is it fulfilled its purpose, right? Which is, Friday, we sat down after the game and we looked at this thing and we went, bam, let's shuffle this stuff into funnels and figure out what we're going to deal with next, what's kind of coming down the line, what's just kind of like on the horizon, way on the horizon, right? Now we can get a view of here are the plot elements and the discoveries that the party has made, which are looming closest, and focus on prepping those and revealing more information about the stuff that's down further pipeline. I really want to make sure that the AI somehow get into this.
I thought that said main enchilada.
Main enchilada.
I was hoping that you would get to that.
Yeah, the main enchilada. I'm going to move that up a lot. Yeah. Radiation starts to cause hallucinations as you get closer to the shaft to hell. I've done quite a few like illusions, hallucinations, dream sequences. I want to be careful with those, but I think there is an opportunity in tomorrow night's game to somehow introduce some sort of like fugue state or something like that. Brian, D20 Monkey asked, do you have a big end game goal for this adventure?
20th level.
Everyone is 20th level. Should I promote everyone to 7th level or 8th level just for tomorrow night?
Just for tomorrow. Without Havana.
That's a great question. Do I have a big end game goal for this adventure? Yes. I think if we look at the themes that are on here, there's another thing that's not on here. Now I am tempted to get out a pen and put it on here.
Oh no. Wait.
Right? So ultimately, I think the big goal here is that they discover a way to screw over Xanathar, right? They really felt like railroaded into this plot line. They don't like this guy. He's just kind of a dick. And it would be a huge feather in their cap to take out the biggest crime lord in Waterdeep. And I think that that is a worthy and satisfying climax to this adventure arc, right? That not only do they figure out what's going on with the ship and they discover a way to escape the ship and possibly like end whatever weird, cataclysm is happening with it. And not only do they figure out a way to create a sacred vessel or re-engineer Grayson's, physical shape to become human or whatever it is, but ultimately, the big payoff is going to be figuring out a way that they can screw over Xanathar.
And if you do give her a cursed book, she's going to be way more into
She'd be way more into screwing that dude over. Oh, she'll be so mad. I think it's going to be one of those deals where if I give her a cursed book, it'll be like a half curse, right? It won't be a full on like, okay, you're screwed, but she has information that Xanathar wants. And she literally said, give me something that will tap into my brain.
It would be interesting, actually, yeah. If she does get the int boost, but he gets all the information of how to get here.
Yeah.
And so when they get out of here, he's there with a bunch of people.
That really like short circuits the
Thanks.
whole,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Tome of Ultimate Evil. Hefty Every.
Give her the Tome of Foes. Ooh, Tome of Foes.
I thought it was Tomb of Foes.
Tomb of Foes, yes. Oh, it was.
It was Tomb of Foes. For those of you who are not aware, Wizards did a big reveal of the new book that's coming out in May.
Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes.
Tome of Foes, which I'm excited about. I'm eager to get more monsters. But when they showed the mock-up of it, they had they had a typo on it. It said Tomb of Foes instead of Tome of Foes.
I thought it'd just be Mordenkainen, all the people Mordenkainen's taken care of, you know? It's just like, well, that guy's dead. There's his tomb.
So we do technically have a place where players can share documents and stuff. We do have a Slack for our players to use, and they've had some good discussion in there about about the game on a metagame level and things like that. But I'm not sure what the question is behind the question. What they specifically would share. Like, we don't have a repository where their character sheets are, things like that.
Yeah.
And to be fair, they also don't use it to discuss the plot in any way, shape, or form, right? They use it to talk about, like, hey, I'm going to be out this week, or can we talk about, like, the player relationships and things like that, or the character relationships, player-character relationships. You know, it's much more for the logistics of running the game than it is a place for them to discuss how they're going to defeat me.
Right. Well, you're in that channel too, so it's a little hard to.
Yeah, and I've had players start up their own, like, private email lists and things like that.
Yeah, we have a Slack, Del Rock. We have a Slack where that the players use.
But we also do have a Discord.
As D20 Robot magically decided to post.
Good job, D20 Robot. You're our friend. So I think that's the big payoff, right? Now, steps along the way are how is the ship broken, and how do we need to fix it, and how do we fix it if that's what needs to happen in order to get us safely off of the ship? Because I think what we will find out, and I would maybe even like to give some hints about it in this next session, is that, yeah, they're on. Number one, that they're on board a ship that's moving, you know, or at least thinks it's moving or whatever. And then number two, that you can't just safely exit the ship by walking back out of
The airlock.
the airlock. And, you know, some of that may have been foreshadowed with the what I'm going to call metal skeletons. Uh-oh. Right? So we can do a callback to this. They very clearly remember those three figures who were all frozen outside the cave. What if they find out that in coming on board the ship, they've been infected with nanites, and if they go to, you know, they get too far away from X, Y, and Z factor in the environment, the nanites start turning on them and converting their body into this weird metal stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, well, that's problematic.
Yeah.
So those are all interesting things. All right, I have one last thing that I want to show you all and share with you, and then I think we're going to wrap things up here. But I was doing some. There's some stuff that I just like randomly find on Twitter that I think is interesting. Blah 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 blah. Right? Well, I came across a cross section of a spaceship. I think this is in the picture. Oh, Tudor, you're so bad. You're glad you're not in the studio right now.
Yeah.
So this is from a series, apparently it's like the longest running science fiction series in existence. And it's called Perry Rhodan, R-H-O-D-A-N. And they must have included these schematics and cross sections on a regular basis, right? And the design and the feel, like especially of this ship and the cross section of it, just feels so similar to what we've got going in here, right? Like the fact that it's circular and there are these turbo shafts that go up and down the various decks and whatnot. And to me, this made the ship feel kind of like epic the way that it's supposed to be epic. Now that page is in German, right? But if you go to the right-hand side, you can Google Translate it if you want. If you go to the right-hand side, it will have links to all of these images from throughout the series, and there's like, I don't know, like 2,000 of these books or something like that, right? Yeah. They don't necessarily have an illustration in every single one, but it will have like whatever they had illustrations for. And so, just as an art reference, there are, let me get rid of this, we've seen enough of this. There are these awesome robots. There are these terrific ships. There's a cross-section of the captain's quarters. They have a bunch of different ships that have cross-sections on them. They have a bunch of different robots. This is one of my favorites right here. And I think there's something worthwhile of like either taking these and maybe photoshopping them a little bit, or somehow including them, you know, as a reference. Because I have to say that I think, not to run down Errol Otis or anybody else, you know, who's involved, but either of these robots is far more alien and technological and interesting and engaging than one of these kind of like fake you out, I'm a person, no, I'm not actually a person, I'm an android robot, right? It's just kind of, encountering this once is fine, but the fact that there's literally like 4 or 5 of them is it gets a little tedious to me. You know, they've already played this trick earlier where you meet the unconscious female form. Where is she? I also feel like, just to give you an idea of how this all fits in, that this illustration right here of this thing fits in far more with this vibe than the weird, you know, like not a person, I'm a person kind of things, right? They have one of like, you see a lady just laying down in the hallway. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna go help her. You know, this is the medical bot. Okay, well, you play this card once, it's fine, but it's just not, hey, FD Every, thanks for joining us. It's just not interesting. It's not fun the second, third, fourth, fifth time that it comes around, right? So you have that link. This is just a small cross-section of the literally hundreds of images that they have in there. But I spent quite a bit of time last night like pulling these things because I think, so we talked earlier about the library portion of the adventure, and I think throwing up like a bunch of, why am I showing you this? A bunch of these images, you know, just quick flashes of those things really communicates like, oh, okay, here's what's going on. It gives an engaging and natural experience of like, oh, okay, this is really like a sci-fi thing that we're doing. But I really think it's cool, especially because it's got all these numbers and detailed parts and kind of cutaway views. But it's all in German, so I don't have to worry about like, oh, well, we're gonna attack the positronic brain and we're gonna stab this thing. No, it's not labeled as positronic brain. Some of the stuff is, right? Like you can puzzle out what it's supposed to be, but, you know.
Were these written by the gnomes, the giant gnomes?
Well, so that's a great question, right? Is that it's all in German, right? So do the gnomes speak some sort of like, are they speaking a weird alien dialect that everyone on the ship, the original inhabitants of the ship speak German? Could be fun, right? It could really be fun and interesting.
Where's Siamath when we need him?
Siamath, I think Siamath is asleep, or maybe, let's see, what is it, 8 hours ahead right now?
In Germany, I think it's 9 hours.
Yeah, at least. Don't look at my phone ever. Okay, Google, what time is it in Hamburg, West Germany?
West Germany?
Well, I'm not old school that way. Oh, it's midnight there. Yeah. So anyway,
Well, see, Thomas is in Denmark, so we could have just asked Thomas.
Yeah, well, there you go. Very good. I didn't realize you're in Denmark. Very good. So those are some great, I think, sample.
Richard's in Italy, so
All right.
we just knew that.
well, I'm glad we have such an international audience. That's awesome. So I think those are some really useful. I don't know exactly. I may, end up photoshopping this so that it becomes more in line with. In our ship, there's a big area in the middle here that's like got a lake in it, and it's the biological zoo area, and there's another level between it or whatever. So I might end up reworking this a little bit if I'm going to make this the canonical map of the ship. But it gives me the opportunity to show them something that's a very cool technical drawing. It feels in line with the same era and the artwork as this adventure, and very much the same feel, as opposed to like there's a bunch of stuff that of concept art that you might find online now at DeviantArt or one of the concept art showcase sites that is either bad 3D modeling that just looks hokey, like it was done on a 386. Or it just doesn't feel like, it just doesn't stylistically blend, or it's too much Star Wars or whatever. This feels like super generic sci-fi, kind of like pulpy, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers kind of era, without specifically saying, I'm Buck Rogers, I'm Flash Gordon, So I feel like it just makes a great generic representation of fantasy alien, fantasy sci-fi, science fantasy, vibe. It's quaint, all of this, onion on stilts kind of thing, as you've pointed out. Like, I love how quaint and outmoded that is. So yeah. So that's the buzz. So check out that link. If you do some creative Googling around Perry Roden, you will find other, and even around that site, you'll find other like spin-off series and other art assets and whatnot. I just found it very inspirational, and I think it's going to really engage the players when deployed appropriately, right? Like it's gonna add a little extra oomph to the game. Not that we don't have a bevy of materials here to do that, but it helps me put that special spin on it that I want it to have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of it is, the great thing is, if you think this is too corny, this weird robot toes and whatnot, don't use that illustration. There's plenty other robots that you can use, right? If this is too Doctor Who for you, which it's not for me, but it is somewhat of a Dalek type of thing.
It looks like an elder thing to me.
Don't use that thing. Yeah, it definitely looks very Lovecraftian, right? Again, plays into like we're in that intersection of like science fiction fantasy.
Yeah.
So check it out. You'll download a lot of spaceships. A lot of spaceships that look very, very similar. There's a spaceship that's like this, except it's like 10 times the size and it has like 15 of these inside of it. It's super weird, some of the stuff that they do. Yeah. All right, so that's all I've got for you today. I hope you can join us tomorrow night for the game. We'll see where we go with things and how everything plays out. I'm interested to get some more meat on the bones here. It'll be our second session inside the ship. I don't think the ship is even named in the adventure, so there's some really big holes in there.
Yeah.
Art station. Curious. I'll take a look at that. Thanks for the thanks for the tip there, Richard. So that's our time together. It's been an hour. Great. I thought it was very productive. Good discussion. Good back and forth. So you can join me, and Dom will be manning the keyboards.
I'll be here, and maybe Harold too.
Maybe Harold. Luigi probably won't be here tomorrow night. I kind of hope not. I don't mind having him 2 days in a row, but that'll be my third day in a row. I can't have him probably tomorrow night unless my wife sends him along with me. So, but you can join me and Eric and Megan and Gaurav. I don't think we're going to have somebody come in and pitch hint.
I don't think so. Yeah. We'll just do the three.
And so that's tomorrow night. Tonight is Black Bag Detectives, yes?
Sir.
So with Mr. DM West, DM GM Keeper.
I don't know. What do they call them in Fate? They just call them GMs in Fate?
Yeah, I think you're just the GM.
Yeah.
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 G-
A GM meeper? No, I don't know. I don't know how. But yes, Mr. Wes Otis, Plate Mail Games.
Morgan Ellis, Terry Gamble,
Kelsey Osborne.
Kelsey Osborne and her new hair.
And her new hair, and Mr. Ben Dunn.
Very good. So you can tune in for that tonight, starting at 8 o'clock Pacific time in a mere 5 hours.
please
So
do.
Richard, have a nap. You need to be back here in 5 hours.
Yeah, I don't know how.
Get up at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. Europe time.
There's probably it's 5 a.m. their time. Yeah.
So tune in for that tonight. We'll be here tomorrow night.
Yes.
At 8 Pacific, and then I will be back along with Dom Thursday at 2. And Thursday night is Star Wars. Never Tell Me the Odds. So if that's happening, you can catch that with
America's DM.
America's DM, David Crennan. And then Friday night, it's back to the wild, wild, savage West.
Yeah.
Did you end on a cliffhanger? Did anything dramatic get
Uh,
revealed at the end of last session that everybody's...
Howell found a clue as to the people who took his wife.
Oh no.
So
Is it time for vengeance?
it might be time for vengeance. We'll see.
Are there going to be shotguns involved?
Either on our side or theirs.
One or the other. So that's sort of our lineup for the week. On Sunday, Tempting Fate is back. Do you know what flavor of Tempting Fate they're going to be
Tempting
playing?
Fate on Sunday is going to be Powers and Responsibility, and it's a DC superhero themed, and
Oh,
I'll be on it.
I thought it was going to be like a Victorian England, like powers and responsibility.
No, although have you seen that new Jane Austen RPG?
I have seen it, on Kickstarter. Yeah, good times.
Anyway, so I'll be on it. Jeremy Walker will also be a guest on that. He was recently on the Madness, the Sagas of Sundry that Ivan had been running, but also Gina DeVivo and Sam DeLev will also be there. So
Awesome.
so come on and tune in. But yeah.
I want to thank you all for joining us. It's been a great time here together and some terrific discussion. I'm sure we'll have more again on Thursday with Disorganized Play. I'm looking forward to running the game Wednesday night. I want to thank BSB Care and Flockwad and all of our mods for keeping the channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible for all of our newcomers, as well as anyone who may drop by.
And
randomly.
DJ Regular.
And DJ Regular.
It's a new mod. Thank you.
Oh, very good. DJ Regular, master of the Twitch clips.
Yes, absolutely.
Very much appreciated. So until next time, let's dungeon!
See?
Wow. Yeah, but can you do it in a new wave style? Let's hear it.
Beep, boop, beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, boop.
That's Funky Town, and that
Well,
predates new wave.
Exactly.
That was more disco.
That's way more new wave.
Disco Dom Zook is
I'm
your
sorry,
new
I did it
nickname.
more new wave than you could even possibly imagine.
Disco Dom Zook.